Welcome back to the discussion of economic liberty. We hear the phrase a lot, well, people need to pay their fair share. Well, who's going to decide what's fair? See, we hear a lot about this phrase, but most people don't really see what's really happening here in this regard. I think somebody put it this way in a very interesting scenario. They described it as a football game. 70,000 people go to a football game and the game is canceled because of severe weather. The team was about to mail refunds, but the congressional folks stopped them and suggested they send out refunds based on the National Committee's interpretation of fairness. After all, if the refunds were based on the price of each ticket that each person paid, most of the money would go to the wealthiest ticket holders. That would be unconscionable. Therefore, people in the $40 seats should get back $60 because they couldn't afford the better seats. They'll call it an earned income ticket credit. Oh, isn't it wonderful to win the semantic wars with words? By earned, it's meant that it demonstrates maybe less ambition or poorer work habits and would keep somebody at a low entry level wage. Okay, people in the $50 seats, they'll get back $50 because that's fair, right? People in the $70 seats would only get back $10 because they've already made a lot of money and they don't need a refund. If they can afford a $70 ticket, then they must not be paying enough taxes. People in the $100 luxury seats, forget about it. They're going to get nothing back. In fact, they're going to be charged an additional $50 because it's obvious they have way too much money to spend already. People driving to the stadium, let's think about them who couldn't afford to even watch the game. We'll get them $25 each, even though they didn't put anything into it because they need it the most of anybody. But do you see, that's what they tell us. But the solution is clear. Each person deserves what he has legally earned each year. The laborer deserves his wages. Now, just using round numbers, that would be, for example, if somebody made $50,000 and the tax rate was 20%, they would pay $10,000. If somebody made $400,000 and the tax rate was 20%, they would pay $80,000 in taxes. Well, that's a lot fair if you want to use that word. Of course it's fair. There's an underlying assumption that taxpayer two who makes more money, he doesn't deserve the remaining amount after tax to enjoy. Well, what I want to ask is whose superior moral judgment will decide what he deserves? The state government? See, this fair rate of taxation does not depend on how much money each person has left after paying taxes. That's not the issue. Remember what the Ten Commandments says, thou shalt not steal. Because that person's wages, no matter how much he makes, they have a special skill as a doctor or an athlete or as a musician. That wage belongs to them, not the government or society. Look, good things happen when taxes are lowered. Business invests more. They create more jobs. And even if the tax rates are lowered, more money actually flows into the government coffers. We've seen that because of this increased business activity. Increased taxes is always the wrong answer because business can modify the way it operates to avoid the higher taxes. And in some cases, this even unfortunately means eliminating jobs. That's why many believe Obamacare will cause huge layoffs because businesses are going to change their models, are going to reduce their staff and their payroll. You know, former President Ronald Reagan learned from his economic advisor, Art Laffer, the father of supply-side economics. And he knew well that cutting taxes resulted in increased investment, new jobs for all Americans, and at the same time it actually brought more revenue into the government. I was brought up with the idea that government would only tax something to discourage using it, like cigarettes or alcohol. Then why would our government raise corporate taxes? If the government continues to do that, isn't it obvious what's happening? If America's corporate taxes were reduced, companies would stay at home here in the USA and create more jobs here, have real growth, and definitely make us more competitive in the world economy, not ship jobs overseas where the corporate taxes are lower. Well, my 10-year-old granddaughter learned about this problem firsthand when she recently traveled to New York and purchased her American doll. After checking out the doll, she noticed there was a Made in China sticker on it. She became really concerned and asked her mother, how could this be an American doll if it's made in China? It's a China doll. Well, it seems to me if people want a fair tax, it should be some national sales tax, while of course eliminating all the other taxes, including all corporate taxes, income, payroll, capital gains, employment, gift, Social Security taxes, Medicare, and the dreaded death tax, the estate tax, and also amending the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, so it would be very difficult to add any new taxes later. The Heritage Foundation estimates that terminating the debt tax would expand business capital by $1.6 trillion and increase new jobs by a whopping 8.6%. Expanded investment. You know, with the national sales tax in place, hard-working Americans could keep 100% of their income. And we would say a final so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye to the big bad bully of higher taxes. You know, the economic liberties from lower taxation will lead to political liberty too. In other words, we can have representation in Congress that limits their jurisdiction to the protection of our God-given rights, not the limitation or the interpretation of them. America's economy can still prosper, that's the good news, and flourish if its government will safeguard individual and economic liberty, bring economic benefit and growth to society, and not take excessive amounts of money for itself and waste it. If we continue to tax individuals and companies under the current oppressive and ever-growing tax code, what George Washington envisioned over 200 years ago seems to play out, namely that government is a fearful master and a dangerous servant. When he uttered those words about the government he had in mind was that of the United States.